Hey guys, welcome back to EverOrg. Today we have Peter again. Peter is a field engineer at a multi-billion-dollar construction firm in the US. Uh, this interview is going to be separated into two forms. The first part is going to be free, as you guys see here. The second part, you can check in the description. It will be a paid version. So if you want to see the full interview, you will have to pay for the second part via the link in the description, but please enjoy the first half of the interview here. Peter, can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, what's up? My name is Peter. I currently am a field engineer, like Max is saying, for a multi-billion-dollar company. Company is probably one of the largest construction companies in the world, one of definitely the largest construction companies in the US. I'm going to try and keep company names out of this, but sometimes we have revenue in the tens of billions of dollars. So just to say the least, I'm an electrical field engineer, so I have a degree in electrical engineering from the College of Staten Island, and this has been my life for the last 3 years.
Okay, so Pete, you're based in Staten Island, New York, which is a borough of New York City.
Mhm.
Um, so you said you got an electrical engineering degree. So can you just break down the origins of how you became a field engineer, and then we're going to go into the compensation.
Sure. So I got an engineering degree, and I never really assumed really that I would really be doing construction in any way, shape, or form, because you get an engineering degree and you want to maybe go into robotics, you maybe want to go into semiconductors and build computer chips, and still those things interest me. You want to build planes, you want to build Tesla Roadsters, you want to do the cool stuff. And then reality hits and you're sitting at home for a couple months and you're like, who am I going to apply to? Because, Lockheed Martin's not answering me because I'm not the perfect candidate. And you just start applying to your construction companies. And thankfully, New York City has a huge, huge construction industry. So I have to say, with an engineering degree, it wasn't very hard to find a job. And I do have some construction experience already in the past, right? I was a intern for a couple of electrical contractors working with tools, actually. So the engineering plus working with the tools in that contractor world is a big win-win, right? So I went on an interview and I got my job just really based off my prior experience.
Okay, so basically, origin is young guy. You have some experience working in a construction firm. I assume like a entry level construction job at a construction company or
Yeah.
doing construction work in general. Have an electrical engineering degree. I think you had, a modest GPA or something of the sort. No, were you like a star, or did you have like a modest GPA?
No, I was very modest GPA. The biggest thing about me was that like to focus on my mental health and my physical health, and a lot of times engineering is very overly stressful in school. So you have to really take a step back and realize that sometimes doing schoolwork for 30 hours a week might not be mentally as healthy as you want it to be. So I did as much as I could do to get my degree, but I definitely didn't do bad in school. I think my engineering GPA was somewhere around a 3.4. My overall GPA was a little bit less, only because in reality, I didn't care about the other classes as much, right? I just needed to really learn as much as I need to learn from engineering.
Okay, so like an average modest student,
Average student.
yeah, some construction experience, got a job relatively easily. Maybe you were on a job hunt for a few months. Um, what type of entry level compensation does somebody with a small amount of construction experience and a decent student command?
So it really depends on the company that you go to work for, right? So the electrical industry in New York is a huge industry with multi-billion-dollar tax revenue going into construction in the city, and 10%, 20% is purely electrical, and another 10, 20% is electrical on jobs that are not 100% electrical jobs, right? So in reality, the compensation in New York is good, but you have to see the type of projects that you're on, right? So if you work in the government sector and you work for a company that does work for government agencies, they're going to wind up paying a little bit more money. If you work for a regular contractor who just builds houses and residential, you're going to make a little bit less starting out, right? So I would say starting salary for field engineer, even cost estimators, very similar positions, right? You're going to say the low end $50,000, and then as you do better in the company, you'll make more. And then the company I started with when I started 3 years ago paid me 72,000 right out of the gate. But remember, we live in New York City, right? So it's not a ridiculous sum of money.
Mhm.
And then now I believe starting salaries are a little bit higher, around 55, and my company pays somewhere in that 80 range, right? So we grow with inflation and we pay good money.
Mhm. So you said so you started off in a electrical entry level electrical engineering slash cost estimation role. Can you just expand on that? Because sometimes I perceived you as a cost estimator, sometimes I perceived you as an engineer. Can you just expand on that?
Sure, yeah. So we actually have a video on this channel, right? When I did start out, I did not start out as a field engineer. So I took my engineering degree and I basically sat at a desk and I read plans and specs and estimated jobs, which basically means I'm helping put in the bid. And I was what you would call a bean counter, right? They make fun of us, right? We just count dots on a piece of paper and lines on a piece of paper. Now you have to be somewhat technically minded, or else you're going to sit through 1,200 pages of specs and you have no idea what you're reading. So you need to really have somewhat of a brain in your head, but it's not difficult work, right? So the cost estimator is you sit down and you really estimate what the project you're working on will cost, and then you fight a battle against other companies, right? And the lowest bid wins, or the best proposal wins. And then a field engineer is, I will do some of that in the field because you have to negotiate change orders, and so you're going to do some estimating in the field. But a field engineer really is working in the field, right? So you have construction workers like electricians who I work closely with on a daily basis. um, I go out and I'm like the right hand man to the foreman. And if the foreman says, I need to do this, what do I need? I say, okay, I'll get you what you need. So basically, the field engineer does a lot of the engineering for the in field work.
Hmm.
So they're
So,
very similar positions. One's in the field, one usually stays in the office.
so it's important to know that when you're starting off as a field engineer, uh, like just like clarify that when you're starting off, you're not particularly doing field engineering work, or you're partially doing field engineering work, right? So like in order to like sometimes become a field engineer, you have to start somewhere else. Can you just like clarify that?
Sure, yeah. So the company I work for hires directly out of college to field engineering positions. Don't get me wrong, right? So it's not 100% mandatory you ever go into estimating to ever be a field engineer. Just at the time, the construction industry was a little slower when I started. So they said, hey, we're looking for people to help us win jobs. You want to come in the office and help us win those jobs? And then when we have an opportunity for you, we'll send you out so you can help give some input in building those jobs, right? So field engineering right out of the gate is a possibility. Even with only an electrical engineering degree, it's a possibility. But the field engineering is something that you have an office at the job site where you actually are assisting in building the work that is already awarded to you
So,
instead of trying to win work.
so, so, as a cost estimator, you were still part of the engineering team. You were still an engineer.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
basically, okay, so you started off with low 70s. Again, it's important that since we are in New York City or in the New York area, when you're listening to this, it's best to use a calculator. Like you could Google a calculator online to adjust the wages. So like what you would get paid in New York would be different than what you would get paid in Arkansas or wherever else. Okay, so can you tell us the progress you made post entry level, so on and so forth?
So position wise or salary wise?
Both, if you can just intertangle them.
Sure, sure. So I started as a cost estimator and then I went directly into the field as a field engineer. And my salary jumped maybe 4% at the time. And then you get like maybe your 2.5 to 3% yearly raises. So I guess after the first year, my salary jumped maybe 8%. So I was around 78,000, right? 79,000 when I started in the field, which is not bad, right? The thing is that you're going to be working a lot of hours. You don't necessarily think it's much money at that point anymore, right? Because you've already worked for a year, or I've already worked for a year. So it just becomes the norm. And then um, we do merit raises, we do yearly raises. So during the yearly raise, I would get my typical 2.5 to 3% that pretty much everyone get to keep up with the times and to make sure that the entry level guys are not going to come in with higher salaries than you. And then you get your merit raise. So there were a couple of years where I made a merit raise and I would get 4% one year, maybe 5% the year after. So after a year and a half, I was just above $80,000. I was sitting at around $82,000, right? And disclaimer here, this is for me to work 10 hours a day, right? So for me to work 10 hours a day, I would get paid 82,000. And then anything above those 10 hours a day was an overtime rate that was a little bit higher. So if I average 55 hours 55 hours a week, which I kind of was, my pay winds up being around 87, right? Not including maybe travel expenses that the company helps out and pays. And then since that time, my pay has then increased to about 89,000, right? So like I said, that 89,000 is for a 10-hour day. And if I work less than 10 hours because there's less work to do, I simply just don't get paid that $89,000. If I work 12 hours a day, I get paid more. So on average, I'm going to make that 89 because there's going to be weeks where I work 60 and weeks where I work 40, right? On average, it's a 50-hour work week though.
So a better question would be, what was for your starting salary? What was your starting hourly wage? What was your starting hourly wage?
So it was a little bit more complicated to explain, right? But my starting hourly wage was flat $30 an hour.
Mhm.
And that is $72,000, but on a 40-hour a week scale, right? That's 1,200,
Okay.
right? So, and then they give like a small incentive amount of money that doesn't count towards your hourly wage, right? Which was like 19% at the time, which was great. So technically my hourly rate was about 36 an hour on a 40-hour week, right?
So your starting hourly wage was $30 an hour. In addition, there was also merit-based, like, or incentive-based pay, like milestone pay,
Mhm.
which increased it to $36 an hour. But that 30,
So the company I work for likes to give a flat rate based on where I live, right? So they negotiate based on, let's say, Chicago, because that's the central hub of whatever district I'm in. And then what happens is that, okay, the cost of living in New York is 90% higher than it is in Chicago. We have to give him 90% more money. So that's where that number comes in. If I worked in New York City, it would be 21%. You understand? So my 72 is technically 60 plus 20%.
okay, and that, so you technically got more than $30 an hour because you live in a area that's a high standard of living.
Yeah, so $36 an hour on a 40-hour work week. So remember, they negotiated this as a salary, even though I was supposed to work 50. If you do the math, a 50-hour work week comes out to like $28 an hour.
Okay, so it's about $36 an hour in a 40-hour work week. However, it's you can expect that in companies like this, you would work about 50 hours a week standard.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have to do the math accordingly. So you did the math. You're a smart guy. So instead of 36 an hour, your entry level hourly wage was about 28 an hour. But because
Give or
you
take a dollar or two, yeah.
but because you work so much, you made about 70K a year. So it's very, very important that people know that if somebody has a position similar to yours, they can expect around $28 an hour cold, meaning that after all is said and considered, all the math is done, you're really getting paid $28 an hour per unit time work, per hour time work, which to me is the most important metric.
Yeah, so if you worked a typical 8-hour day on a 27 to $29 an hour wage, you'd make around $55,000 to $60,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, they knew going in that you would be working more, so they did compensate upfront more for that.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So people who watching this should be mindful of this mathematics. They should be mindful that how much I make per hour might not equate. They have to be mindful of the difference between a yearly salary and an hourly wage, and they should do the math for both because they're
Yeah,
not always equivalent, right? Hopefully, I articulated that well. I hopefully
yeah,
people,
100%.
yeah. I don't think I articulated that perfectly, but I think people understand what I'm trying to say. But super important. Don't confuse salary with hourly wage. That's really what I'm trying to say, right? Uh, okay, so Pete, your true hourly wage was about $28 an hour entry. Explain to us how much money somebody in your position should expect to increase every year based on an annual raise. And then we're going to talk about merit. So, what should we expect via an annual raise, like a standard annual raise per inflation?
About 3 to 4% maximum.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So 3 to 4% is maximum. So people in your position should expect every year $28 an hour around there, plus 3 to 4% every year. Did you have anything else to say? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no. If you're working at smaller companies, right? They're gonna go with whatever contract that they have with their negotiating partner. Like if you're part of a union, the union mandates 3% a year. That's what you'll get. If you're part of a non-union shop and there's maybe a mandate per the government, right? It might be 2% a year, right? So the non-merit based raises, non-performance based raises could be anywhere between 2 and 4%. So on average, about 3%, which just kind of beats inflation prices. So you're just kind of almost staying at the same salary without performance based raises.
Got it. Okay. Super important. Um, are you aware what what the inflation rate is like on average?
I think for the last 50 years, it's an average of 3.2%, but in the last 10 years, it's been a little bit lower.
Okay. Okay. So they pay you a little bit more than
They try to, yeah.
expand on the merit raise. Please use the hourly wage as a standard of comparison.
So for instance, a merit based wage is, let's say my very first merit based wage is the second raise that we get during the year. Like they come along and he said, here's $1.45 an hour, and you might think that's not a lot, but on a percentage point basis, that's almost 7%. And if you already got a yearly raise at the beginning of the year that was 3.5%, your salary just increased close to 11%, 12% for the year because you compound those numbers.
Okay, so a high performing employee like you in your position could expect about a 10% uh, merit based increase on your hourly wage every year.
Um, so the problem with giving that as a definitive advice is that it's a little bit easier, I think, to get a merit-based wage increase as a younger employee who's just starting out, right? And it's not because you work any harder, it's just because they know that the sky's the limit for you. And if you're performing anywhere near your capacity, they have every incentive to make sure that you stay with the company. And that's what they do to help you out. So somebody who's there for 10 years might completely outperform me, even in their own respect, and make nowhere near as big as a raise only because they cost too much money.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. So, So it's important to understand. So younger employees might get more merit-based pay, like more of an increase when it comes to merit-based pay. But okay, so somebody in your position, what was your annual average merit-based pay increase?
Um, so I've been at the company for 2 years and 3 quarters, and I've gotten, so the first year I didn't qualify for the raise because I started in September and they give out the raises in October. So the first merit-based wage increase was $1.45, which was 6.5%, and the second one was $1.19, which was about 5%. So the third year would be this year. And now this really depends on the project that you're on, the people that you work with, so you might think you're busting out and working really hard and performing, but maybe you're not interacting with enough people, right? Maybe people don't know what you're doing. They just put their head down and do their own work. And if that's the case, you need to speak up and discuss with your superiors what you're doing, right? It's not 100% merit based. It might be a little political too, right? You want to make friends with, and I'm not saying it in a arrogant way, right? You just want to make sure that your superiors know what you're doing, right? Because then they understand what you're worth, right? You want your superiors to really understand what you're worth more than I think you want to just perform with your head down.
Mhm. Okay, so appreciate that advice, but just to summarize the salary portion of this video, so far we need to be aware that there's a difference between annual salary and an hourly wage. We need to be aware of annual raises. We need to be aware of merit-based raises. So we're aware of those three things. Is there any other type of raise that we should expect?
So me personally, I'm part of a union,
Mhm.
and every 3 years the union renegotiates
Mhm.
what they would call a collective bargaining agreement. Now, the construction workers that I work with, this affects them probably a little bit more, but there's a potential that your yearly based raise might increase based on what the union negotiates with their agreement. So if the union says, you know what, we've hit some rough times and anyone who stays at the company really deserves a 4.5% raise for the next 3 years, every year, the company almost always has to oblige. But other than that, there are no hidden raises, at least with the company that I work for. Maybe you can get a raise when you get promoted, right? So your first promotion, if you perform within the first 3 months, you're more than likely going to get an increase in pay.
Mhm. Okay. Can you talk to us about the benefits?
Sure, yeah. So there's a lot, right? So it really depends on the company, like pretty much everything I'm talking about. So the way my company works is that there's a general contractor who I was initially hired on for, and then there's a subcontractor who in reality is just one and the same company. We're just the electrical division of the company. And the biggest problem with New York City, it's not really a problem, but the biggest obstacle that big general contractors like the company I work for go into with New York City is that New York City won't allow you to work on a government project unless you pay union local 3 wages, or you pay a prevailing wage, which is I think $56 an hour, right, for the electricians. So the union has a rule where I have to be part of that union, right? So they pay me the union benefits, right? So we can go into the company benefits and then we can go into the union benefits, which differ just based on the type of project you're working on.
Right. So the viewer should be aware that if it's a union-based job, they need to be aware of two separate benefits, one from the company and one from the union.
Yeah, so with the electrical industry, it's a different case for the engineers. So most people watching this, if you're not an electrical engineer and you're a mechanical or a civil engineer, you're not going to receive union benefits. They don't have those stipulations in the civil contractors and in the mechanical contractors contracts that all parties need to be part of the union, right? So I'm on a little bit of a luck lucky streak, I guess you can say, just being an electrical engineer in New York City.
Okay. So, okay, so that's very important. So if you're an electrical engineer, you can safely expect union and company benefits.
No, you would have to expect the union benefits, right, which are different, potentially better than the company benefits. So if I worked for a company that was a general contractor like I do, and I was an electrical field engineer working under the electrical company, then I get union benefits. But if I go in as a mechanical engineer and I'm working for the mechanical company within the general contractor, the mechanical company doesn't care if they pay me company benefits or if they pay me subcontractor benefits, union benefits. So they pay me the company benefits because they have no reason to change that pay structure. It gets very complicated when you have to pay different benefits because I'm just on a different job site, right? The company doesn't necessarily like doing it because it's a huge accounting fiasco in reality.
Okay.
And we're a little more expensive in that, right?
Okay. So to regroup, civil and mechanical, they're not legally required to get union benefits. Electrical engineering is required to provide union benefits. Now,
In New York City.
in New York City, guys, please check your local laws, but please be aware of that. Are there could be possibly areas where mechanical engineers get local union benefits and not the others? It
It's
depends on the law.
possible. It's possible. It's not a snare that I've encountered yet.
So people should be very aware of the laws.
Very aware. Yeah.
Um. So Pete, you get both company and union benefits. Can
No.
no. Okay. So basically, okay. So I'm just gonna paraphrase what you said. Then, how do they like? How do you know if they're gonna contradict or not? So who chooses which benefits you receive?
So let's say I work for X, Y, and Z company. That's the parent company, right? They pay me their benefits.
Mhm.
They say, you know what? You're going to be working in New Jersey, or you're going to be working in Pennsylvania for us, or you're going to be just estimating in the office in New Jersey. You don't have to be in the union. We're going to just pay you our benefits. Or they say, you know what? We really need an electrical engineer to go to X, Y, and Z job site in New York City. If I step foot on a job site for that company in New York City, the local union will mandate I get paid union benefits. And then usually what's the word, uncomplicate or decomplicate or keep it less complicated, I will continue there on out to either estimate jobs in New York City, uh, project manage jobs in New York City, or work on jobs in New York City, so they don't have to necessarily take me out of that benefit structure because it's flip flopping back and forth, and it could get very messy.
So basically, what electrical engineers do. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the private company and the union. And depending on your current positioning in the company, you will get paid benefits uh, accordingly. So,
Mm,
but usually the company is in charge of paying the benefits. But
yes.
if something, uh, if something significant happens, like out of the normal, like you have to go to a different territory or something of the sort, then the union might step in to make sure you have the best uh, compensation.
Yes. So let's say they have an opportunity for me in upstate New York, right? If the jurisdiction of the union I work for is not covering that piece of land, then they have no obligation to pay me the benefits. Now they can choose to pay me the union benefits, but more or less they will not pay me those union benefits.
Okay. So what's most important is that people have to be aware of the relationship they have between their company and the union they're a part of, if they're part of the union.
Yes.
So they should figure out what is expected from them from the job. And if something expected from them is extreme, like going to a different territory or traveling far distances, they should research and figure out if their corresponding union does anything to help with that,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So that is a very important thing engineers should be aware of. Um, is there anything else you can expand on regarding benefits?
Sure. Yeah. So just the the pay structure for the benefits for the company and for the union, I can pretty much speak on both. So I'm going to go with the company first. It's a little bit easier to understand. It's a less complicated structure. So the company I work for, they pay 6% 401k match, right? And then after X amount of years and certain amount of production that comes out of you, they have the ability to give you stock options, which can grow at any rate from 0 to 100%, right? Once that happens, they take away your 401k. But in reality, the stock of the company, if you want the company to do well, you want the stock to do well. So you more than likely will make more than a 6% return. So the company, the general contractor I work for, they cover health and dental, but not fully. So your health insurance might be like $15 a week, which is what, $60 a month, which is nothing. And you have almost full coverage up to $1,000 deductible. And then once you hit $1,000 deductible, they cover 80% up to another $1,000. And then after that, it's free. So you pay up to $2,000 a year. If you have a family of 5, you pay up to $4,000 a year. So the most you really ever pay out of pocket with $15 a week plus $4,000 a year. So if you're the type of person like me who just goes to the doctor and gets medicine once a year, it's not a big deal at all. You pay $15 a month and then you spend the full price on your medication, which is $150. And for the year, it's not that much money anyway, right? So it is good coverage. Now, if you have a baby, right, surgery might be covered differently and you might get charged $4,000 to $10,000 and then the rest will be covered after that. So it really depends on the type of medical you need. Dental is like $3 a week, so it's really not a lot of money. It's money that comes out of your paycheck you don't even really feel. What else does the company have? The company itself has a bunch of just other benefits, right, that I get as well, even though I'm part of the union. So a huge benefit of the company is training, right? Most companies don't train as well. I think the company puts anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000 per person per year for the first 4 years into you. So that's a huge benefit, right? Now, you want to talk about union benefits, they get way more complicated and they're worth a little bit more money, right? So the general contractor's benefits are worth about 50 cents, 60 cents on the dollar, not including the training. The actual benefit package, if you would say, the union benefits are worth about 90 cents on the dollar. So when you look at it from above, right, the company does the right thing. And no matter where you're working, your total compensation is about the same, right? So if I'm union or in general contractor benefits, they say, hey, your total package is worth 170. We're going to switch you over and this total package here will be worth 170, right? So the company's pretty good at keeping that even. The benefits though for the union are a little bit better in the sense where you don't pay for medical or dental at all, right? You just get it paid by the contractor. So I don't pay a single dollar out of my check and I go to the doctor and I pay $30 to do anything. Right now, maybe if I go get surgery, it's $250, but how often does somebody get surgery at the age of 27 years old, right? Unless I'm getting hit by a car and I'm going to be in the ICU, I'm not going to need those bills. They're not going to matter to me. The eye doctor, right, is free, basically, as long as they're an in-network eye doctor. If not, the company pays $2 a week. The company pays, you don't pay. The company pays $2 a week, and then you have to pay your copay at the eye doctor. Similar scenario. Now, the 401k is for the administration division, which is what I'm part of. It's 75 cents an hour, so it is comes out to less than 6% for sure. Depending on the money I make now, it's definitely less than 6%. After 5 years or 4 years, you can opt to take a higher percentage in lieu of your vacation days. So vacation's big. It's 3 weeks either way, right? Whatever company you're with. So I get 3 weeks of vacation or paid time off days. The union has a pension, right? So basically what you do is the company is mandated to pay 35% of your salary into a pension fund. So if I make $1,000 this week, $350 goes into the fund. That doesn't mean that I get $350 a week when I retire. That means that the union I work for has a financial advisor in the background who takes his $35 and invests the money, makes a bunch of money, and then he calculates what each year of your work is worth. And right now they're worth about $90 per month. So if I work 10 years, When I retire, I get $900 a month in retirement benefits, right? In that pension benefit. What else is there, right? So the big thing about the union, where like the contractor will train you, the union has their own type of training, right? And their own types of benefits at the union hall. Like you can go directly to the union hall and get a checkup, right? For completely free, right? You don't have to pay even a copay. The union has its own type of training, right? Where you go in and you learn about the specific electrical work that they do. So benefits, I would say, on top of pay, are probably the most important factor when choosing a job, right? So if you're working for a company, like let's say I worked for the general contractor of this company, right? I have to realize that the benefit package is worth about 60 cents on the dollar. If I was leaving to go to some other random general contractor, let's say, and the benefit package is worth 40 cents on the dollar, I have to then compare my total compensation. And that's a huge, huge deal, right? The union takes that away a little bit, right? So if I go from one union company to another union company, the total compensation is solely based on the amount of money they're going to pay you because the union benefits are not allowed to change.
Okay.
Last but not least, the company does a lot of things in the way of paying for the people who stay, in the sense where you might get a car, you might get your tolls paid for, you might get your gas paid for, right? And then you get your cell phone paid for. So there are other non-spoken benefits upfront that after a couple of years that you might be eligible for.
Peter, can you break down the 401k structure in layman's terms? So does the money come out of your hourly wage or your paycheck into your 401k? And can you, like, in layman's terms, explain how a 401k structure at a company like yours works? Because I find it particularly interesting because your company does it in a unique way, I think.
No, so it's so there's two different ways they do it, right? So the general contractor will pay 6%, which is a normal way that a 401k works, right? A 6% match, meaning that if I put 6% of my salary into my 401k, the company says, okay, we like that you're saving for your retirement. We're going to match that 6%.
Mhm.
Now, the company that I work for, the union, they pay 75 cents an hour into my 401k. So it's a unique structure for the administration that we get. So what happens, right? Let me explain. I could pay any amount of money I please into my 401k, but they say, okay, you get 50 hours a week, you get 75 cents an hour. So we're putting in $40 a week, right? That comes out to what? 2% of my salary, 3% of my salary, maybe, right? So it's a little unique because it's just part of the package, right? They go, here's 75 cents an hour. Here's an annuity that is 20 cents an hour, right?
But do you choose to work with the private company or the union? How do you do? Who do you? How do you get to choose?
No, so like I said, if I work in the union, those benefits come, right? So 6% is more money in a 401k. But at the end of the day, the union benefits wind up being more
Mhm.
because you might get an annuity that's $15 a week, and that's another $60 a month that you get, right? You might get another fund like an HRA fund, right, with the health retirement account where, or any health savings account of some sort, and they pay $1 an hour into that fund, right? So I can go to the doctor at any point in time and not have to pay my copay. It comes out of this fund, right? So there's a bunch of different hourly rates that go into your pay structure, and 401k just happens to be one of them for the union, at least.
Can you clarify when you would be uh, adding to your 401k with your company versus the union? Because I just would like to have clarification on that because sometimes you're contributing to your 401k via the union, and sometimes you're doing with the private company that you work for. Can you explain, like,
So as a person, I contribute any amount of money into my 401k. I can contribute $100 a week, right? The company, right? If I work under the company, right? So I'm not in the union. I am not covered by the union in any way. they pay 6%,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a match.
Mm-hmm.
So if 100% is equal to 6%, they pay $100 worth 6%, they pay $100.
Mm-hmm.
If I work on a union project and I am part of the union, right? Like I was saying before, it's separate entities, right? If I'm working on a project where I am part of the union,
Mm-hmm.
then the 401k structure changes to a 75 cents an hour input into the union, into
So,
the 401k.
so it's important to know that depending on the current project you're working on, you will be either under the union's rules or the company's rules. When you're under the
Yes.
union's rules, you do the 75-cent method per hour.
Yes.
When you're under the company rule, you get matching up to 6%.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Um, Same goes with medical, right? So you broke down the medical benefits. So if you're currently working on a project with the union that falls under the union's benefit jurisdictions, you do union medical benefits. If you're working on your company's benefit jurisdictions, then you're getting medical benefits from your private company. Um, it's very important for people to understand that the type of job you have is heavily project based, right? So when you talk about falling under union or private company benefit jurisdictions, people should know that it could, like, you could be working on a year-long project under the union, and then you could be working on a year-long project under private equity. So when somebody's hearing that you're either working using benefits for the private company versus the union, people should understand that you can spend an entire year working under union jurisdictions because you might have to commute very far somewhere. So I just want people to understand that there are long periods of time where your benefits change, right?
Possibly. Yes, that is 100% true. It is possible. Now, what they try to do is that once they make a decision to keep you in the union, right, then they'll make sure that you're on projects that are union jurisdiction. Then there are some engineers where they might spend the first 7 years of their entire career not in the union and just working on other projects outside of the union jurisdiction. So it's rare that they go like this. You here to here to here to here. It's more like there's two people and you stay here for a while and you stay here for a while.
Mhm.
Now, each project we work on is between 2 to 4 years in reality. That's very rare. It's less than that. So if they are going to switch you back and forth, you have around the 3 to 4 year grace period where you're collecting one type of benefit, right? Now it gets messy because the 401ks, for instance, are just a very easy example. They use two different companies. So one, the general contractor, the private company uses Fidelity, while the union uses Prudential. So if I switch back and forth, you're talking about 75 cents an hour that goes into my Prudential for 3 years. All of a sudden, at 6% that goes into a Fidelity, and now my money is not being compounded as a whole anymore. And it gets very messy because if I transfer my money from one 401k to the next and I only have one 401k account, right? I might make 9% this year in my Fidelity, but only make 7% in my Prudential. But if I had all my money in one or the other, I might have made 7% on the total or 9% on the total. So it gets very messy, and they try to keep people in one system or the other for a longer period of time to make it just very easy, right?
Mhm. Mhm. So Pete, to round things off, so we talked about the compensation, the benefits, the type of raises you should increase. People can do the math with all of that. What are what milestones, what points in your career does a field engineer expect the biggest boosts in their compensation?
I would say the first 3 years, and then pretty much responsibility increases after that, right? So if I go from a field engineer to a job superintendent, or what they would call a project manager, then I'm 100% going to see an increase in compensation because the responsibility jumps.
Mhm.
And then if I go from being a superintendent or job superintendent to a project engineer, That could be a lateral move where you might make a little more money just because you're with the company longer. And then you go from project engineer and you take on a $3 or $4 million project in and of yourself as a project manager. You can expect a big increase in salary because there's a big increase in responsibility. And at the company I work for, they have executive level project managers, right? That pretty much take care of a group of project managers. And that's probably another large salary increase, right? And then they have the vice presidents, right? Which switch every 3 to 4 years because they like to promote from within. And that's probably your biggest salary increase at that top point right there. So from me to the highest person above me, there's maybe 5 or 6 big jumps in pay, upwards of 20 to 30% at a time, probably.
Hmm. Hmm. And is it reasonable to forecast what type of salary jumps there is, or is it highly variable?
So I could make assumptions, right? And these are only my assumptions, right? Somebody in my position will make anywhere between 75 to about 90.
Mhm.
And then when you get that position above me, I would say you can make anywhere between 85 and 105. And then those project managers, that 2 or 3 positions above me, can probably make anywhere between 100 and 120.
Mhm.
Depending on how long you stay in that position, you can probably get to that 150 range.
Mhm.
And then you have that that equivalent field experience raise where you're a superintendent who is working with other superintendents under him, right? So that's 2 or 3 positions above mine as well. That's that probably that 150 range. Like I'm saying, these are all speculation, but just based on having conversations with coworkers, this seems about the right path. And then when you hit that 15 to 20 year mark and you're that executive project manager where you have project managers working under you, I could say on the lowest end, you have to be making 150 to 180. And that's after about 15 years at the company. And this is in 2020 dollars. So if you account for inflation, by the time I get to that point, you're talking about somewhere between 180 and 220, right? And then from that executive project manager position, you have those VP positions, which I personally believe you can make anywhere between 2 to 300K, but your money is more than likely going to come from the stock options that you more than likely are going to wind up paying into. So a normal VP of a company as big as mine, right,
Mhm.
probably has compensation in the millions of dollars,
Mhm.
right? You work for a company that brings in, you are the VP of a company that brings in $75 million of revenue a year,
Mhm.
right? You basically are the CEO of that company. Your salary should be pretty high, but they pay nice dividends and they pay nice growth on their stock. So just making believe numbers, that person could potentially have multiple millions of dollars in stock options at the point due to 40, 30 years of growth. So you might not make a big salary, but you might have big, big jumps in stock, right? Let's say you get 1 year where the stock grows 25% because the company did astounding. If you've been investing for 30 years and that portfolio made a couple of those jumps over your career and it's worth $3 or $4 million, 25% of $4 million is $1 million. You basically made $1 million this year in
Mhm.
your stock portfolio. So that's a retirement account basically, but it's possible to make lots of money. You just have to be with the company long term, right?
Mhm.
And that pretty much goes for almost any company. I can bet you if you go work for any Fortune 300 company like the company I work for, and you're there for 40 years, you're retiring with a couple $1 million in the bank.
Mhm. 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 So a lot of the people who work at your company, they retire as uh, technical millionaires, like we were previously talking about. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So just a disclaimer, I'm giving these from, I guess you could say, kind of understanding the way the company works. hearing some numbers, being explained the numbers myself, but I can't give exact numbers based on the fact that I don't know exact numbers. I'm not really allowed to give you exact numbers no matter what, even though I didn't give out the name of the company, right? So I just want to be clear here. These numbers are going to be for generic, like, purposes of math, really. If somebody like me starts receiving a stock option at the age of 30, which would be I've been at the company for 5.5 years. If I work from 30 to 60, which is 30 years with stock, and I put in even a small amount every year of $15,000, right? And that's a number that I could potentially be offered upfront, and in 30 years from now, you might get offered to buy $100,000 worth of stock, right? I don't know those numbers because they won't disclose those, right? It's not something that they want to tell us yet how much you could have. But for easy numbers, 30 years at $15,000 a year, you retire without any growth whatsoever with $450,000, right? If you retire now with 7%, right, growth per year for those 30 years, right? Your money quadruples, right? So every 10 years at 7%, your money doubles. So the first 10 years, you're going to have 300, not 150. The second 10 years, you're going to have 600, not 300. The third 10 years, you're going to have 1.5 million, right? Not 750, right? So what happens is that at a conservative level, if you invest 15% with a conservative growth at 7%, you have $1.5 million in the bank. Now, if you want to stretch those numbers out and say it's an average of $20,000 with an average of 10% growth, you're talking about $3 million. Mm-hmm. And those numbers are still, in my opinion, conservative for the type of company that I work at. So you have people who've been at the company for 30 years who I can only imagine have $6 to $10 million, but their responsibility 100% came with it. Somebody in my position doesn't stay in my position for 30 years and just get that $6 million like trajectory. It doesn't happen. You have to be producing consistently for the company to get anywhere near that number.
Okay. This is obviously, it's important to know that nobody can speculate that the company's stock can grow for 30 years or how much it can grow for 30 years, right? This is just complete speculation.
I agree. Yeah.
Complete speculation. Guys, like we said at the beginning of the video, please note that we are not certified to provide financial advice. We're just trying to help the best we can. We hope that you enjoyed the interview. But Peter, do you have any closing thoughts?
If you guys like engineering and you want to do some building, right? Go into construction, right? It's a lucrative career. It is not something that generally will make you a multimillionaire. Like, you're not going to be worth $20 million when you're done unless you're really good at investing in the stock market, which I hope everybody could be. But it's a career that can be very fulfilling. It's a career that will put you in a position where you are comfortable. You won't have to go to the grocery store and worry about what you're picking up off the shelves, right? It gives you that leeway, right? It might not feel like it's worth it while you're in college or those first couple of years, but the life that it provides you is something that you could seriously be comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Peter, thank you.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me.